Hello, I'm Shaun Richards of Not a Yes Man's Economics. What I want to talk to you about this time around is the issue of central banks and what I think they'll do next. Why is this even an issue? Well, you see, we've seen so many moves, but basically they haven't worked. If we look at the situation, obviously things have been pushed lower by the COVID-19 pandemic. But even before then, there were signs that the world economy was slowing. Certain areas had come to no growth at all. Even worse in the case of Japan, where at the end of last year, beginning of this, the economy was shrinking anyway. There were concerns over the euro area slowing, my home country, the UK, and so on. But we've seen so many policy moves by central banks that were supposed to address this. We've had, in fact, more than a decade of this now, of interest rate cuts, quantitative easing, bond buying, credit easing, and in many places, negative interest rates and negative bond yields. And these things have spread pretty much around the world. For example, overnight, there was a situation whereby in New Zealand, for the first time ever, a bond yield went negative. Now, it's very minor at the end of the decimal point range, 0.001, I think, for the 3-year bond. But these things, once they arrive, tend to spread. And this is one of my points today. These things do spread, but we never actually seem to go backwards. When did interest rates go back up? It seemed very little, only a small amount in the United States. Have some of the QE bond buying ever being reversed? Elsewhere, we've seen nothing like that. One of the situations that's out there that I think central banks will copy, because they are pack animals, they do herd like sheep, is the situation in Switzerland and Japan, where we see them actually outright buying equities. Now, there is a difference between the two. And what I mean by that is the Swiss National Bank uses its foreign currency reserves because the Swiss franc is strong. It's regularly intervening against it. Along the way, it started traditionally with foreign exchange reserves. Central banks buy bonds from around the world. But buying them, they'd start the euro area, that's near them. That seems reasonably logical, except they were buying so many, they were distorting those markets. One way out of it was that they started buying equities, mostly in the United States, because it's the world's biggest market. So they hold somewhere around $120 billion now. So that's a move. And this is an influence of monetary policy, although in this thing, as you can see, there are external elements because Switzerland is buying equities outside. If we switch to Japan, it buys domestically. In strict terms, it looks to match the Nikkei 400 index with its purchases, but the Bank of Japan believes that their gains from outright buying equities and boosting the value of the equity market. Now, it's been doing this in principle for the best part of a decade now, but there was an acceleration around about 2014. In fact, there was another acceleration recently. You might spot that's another part of the theme. Always more, never less. Twice this month of September, it's bought 80 billion yen clips. So the beat continues here. And it's becoming an increasing player in the Japanese equity market. Now, what does that mean? Again, it's always difficult to say at what point something started its influence and ended. But at times, the Japanese stock market has pretty much trebled from where it began. It's not the only influence. But other central banks will be looking at that and thinking, they call this wealth effects. Some of you might be calling it inflation. And of course, there are effects for those that don't have shares that lose out. But in the end, these things tend to spread. So it will come to more central banks. Thank you.